Congresswoman Maxine Waters, I mean, really, she almost needs no introduction, but we're going to introduce her anyway. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, 15 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, and I got to tell you, it will be 15 more and still counting. And Congresswoman Maxine Waters, past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and also I happen to mention, too, a couple of little personal things. She's my congresswoman in the 43rd Congressional District, and also a very, very good friend. What can be done to make sure that small businesses get their fair share at this point to sustain them? Because if they're not sustained, we're going to lose. The estimate I've seen, Congresswoman Waters, 1/4 to 1/3 of small businesses in the country. What's being done?
Well, thank you so very much for, making this the top of the program that we're doing today, because you're absolutely correct. Not only am I disturbed, I have worked very hard learning what happened. First of all, Earl, you need to know that prior to PPP being launched, I called together the CEOs of the big banks. They all made strong commitments that with the coming PPP, that they were going to not only make the loans, but they're going to be happy to assist with applications, that this is something that they could do without any problems. Well, they lied. As a matter of fact, they went back and they created their own rules. We, on that first appropriation, had $250 billion for PPP. And what the banks did was they decided to act not only in their own best interest to make it convenient for them, but I'm convinced now, after digging, they acted in a way to make money for themselves. And I'll tell you how. First of all, never in our conversations did they say that they were only going to take applications from those clients who already had SBA accounts.
Right.
Never, never, never. And this is what they did. And that excluded so many of the people in our communities who've not really ever been successful with SBA. SBA has always been difficult to access and to get connected with many of the small businesses. Many of the small businesses didn't even try anymore to deal with SBA because they had not been easy to deal with. But this is what the banks did. And then the banks turned around, as I have discovered in my investigation. They targeted what we call their concierge clients. These are their VIPs. These are their high-end clients.
Wow.
And they created a special portal for them to make their application. They started getting ready before the PPP
incredible.
Was launched. And they created this portal. They identified their concierge clients who supposedly would be eligible, and that was the high end. And that high end was supposed to be if you have 500 employees or less, you fit into SBA. But we also found there was a trick that had been slipped into the legislation that eluded us, that said 500 didn't mean what 500 means. Many of these businesses who have multiple locations, that legislation basically is allowing them to not only have 500 employees in one location, but 500 employees in several locations. And so some of the motels and restaurants with multiple locations were able to apply for each of those locations, which means they managed to get millions of dollars. That is not what is intended. We have investigated, we have discovered it, and in addition to that, these SBA loans that the banks were managing, they are paid whenever a lending institution is doing this kind of work for a government agency. They're paid. And guess what? The bigger the loan, the more percentage they are paid. They get 1% of every one of those big loans. While, in fact, if they were only doing the low end, the small businesses, they supposed to get 5%, but 5% of $200,000 is not nearly what's worth, same as or synonymous to or as valuable as 1% of several $1 million that they were doing. So we've investigated that. We're learning this. I'm putting together legislation. In addition to that, I'm calling the banks back in, and I'm going to do everything that I can as the chairwoman of the Financial Services Committee to leverage my power to deal with them. And let me just tell you this. I dealt with them in the supplemental emergency legislation we just passed since we passed the big CARES bill. In the subsequent legislation, what I did was, in addition to that $250 billion, I carved out $60 billion for little lenders, for the minority banks, for the black banks, for the credit unions, for the community banks, and for the community development financial institutions. These are your small lenders. We carved out $60 billion and targeted to them. And then we even broke up the $60 billion and said, okay, if you're a really small bank, less than $10 billion, you get $30 billion, and the others who have, banks that are up to $50 billion, you get another $30 billion. So that what is happening is now people don't have to rely solely on the big banks, even though people can still go to the PPP when we replenish. We're replenishing because they ran out of money. They ran out of money after letting too much of this money go. Almost 50%, I think 45% of it went to these concierge clients, these VIP clients. And so what we're saying is we're replenishing with this supplemental legislation that we have done. And now people have more places to go. They can go to smaller banks. We made sure that they are SBI connected to our minority banks who are not doing SBA work, rather SBA. They can now be SBA participants, and to the community development financial institutions. These are the smaller lending institutions that were created, I believe, back under the Clinton administration, and they are funded through the Treasury Department. Some of our churches have CDFIs and smaller institutions. So now they are targeted. We have additional places people could go. We're putting pressure back on the big banks for people who go to PPP, the people who've been standing in line, who have numbers that they were given, but they were not given loans, got to be taken care of. The new people got to be taken care of. And let me tell you, we're going to do everything that we can to make up to these small businesses.
Well, very good. Two things, Congresswoman Waters. Let me say this first, Leroy. While Congresswoman Waters was going through the lengthy, and it was very lengthy, things that are being done, proactive, we didn't interrupt because I think it's so important. I do have questions, but no, I think it was so important for the 7 or 8 minutes, Congresswoman Waters, that you spoke, to outline exactly specifics, what people can do, where they can go, and information. We're not getting that routinely. We're getting a lot of soundbite stuff, but specifics. And you gave that. The other thing I think that's important, Congresswoman Waters, well, extremely important, for people to know that there's hope. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, listen, we love you. Prayers and love to you and your family, for your sister. And all we can say is, to punctuate it, keep doing what you're doing. We got your back. Congresswoman Waters, you always got an open platform on the Hutchinson Report. You know that. Anytime. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you so very much. I love the Hutchinson Report. I appreciate you are helping to get the word out there. You two are the talking drum. So thank you so much for who you are, what you do, your fight, your commitment to equality and justice that's demonstrated not only in the Hutchinson Report, but the work that you do every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congresswoman Maxine Waters. One more cheer, Ricky. Thanks again, Congresswoman Waters. And needless to say,